Texas!
Yeah!
That has nothing to do with San Francisco. You couldn't get further away from San Francisco values than Texas.
Fuck yeah.
Right?
True.
I mean, there might be some cool Texans. I apologize to Texans, native Texans that are here.
I don't.
But our values are a little bit different, and our policy statements from this building are a little bit different. And this is the only sanctuary for medical cannabis in the world. So when we go up there tonight at 5 o'clock, we need everybody with us. We encounter an entire congregation of people who have been told in their native tongue that we are a danger to their children, that we cause a safety hazard. And we know that that's not true. And I believe the supervisor knows that that's not true. And her duty is to explain to people what medical cannabis actually is, right?
Right.
But instead, she's really trumping up fear.
Medicine.
It is medicine, exactly.
This is the dispensary.
Yeah.
Can you see what it says on the back?
It's about the medicine. Let's all say that together. It's about the medicine.
Yeah, baby. About it.
So we've got the providers right here. We've got Ed and Greg. We've got one of our federal defendants, Tom. They're hanging their hat on a letter that made no sense.
Heck yeah.
Enough of me. I'm so happy to be here with everyone. This is really beautiful turnout. We're really happy. And I want to thank all the people from Acts to Love that made this happen. Let's give a big thank you to Jay. Let's give a big people, Laura, Ivan, all these people have been working all morning to make all this happen.
Okay, what is that?
With a wonderful donation from Scott and Diane, who are on federal trial for us now.
No,
And
she won't do anything. She's just
really
never seen
hard
one. It's her.
on a family. This
he'll
is a
attack her.
family. And it's really hard. They were arrested in front of their 8-year-old son.
to an animal is
In front of their son.
All right,
This
move back.
causes trauma in families. So when they're talking about safety, let's talk about the safety of our families. Literally in the middle of the street. State of California. I don't know what we want to call this. We are still in San Francisco, right there. Not alone.
That dog's suspect. That's a...
So we started off the day by feeding everybody. Then we went up to the federal court building for Scott Fell and Diana Fell's hearing of motions. And when we walked into that courtroom, we walked into Magistrate Zimmerman's courtroom. Not a bad guy. Not a bad guy, you know. Just because he's a federal magistrate doesn't mean he's a jerk. So, in that session, the federal defendants, and there's not just Scott and Diane, and Tom, those are the folks that we know that came to the community center that helped educate me about what's happening in their federal case and helped educate everybody that was at that session. But there are a couple co-defendants that we don't know that were there as well. And when we got up there, we heard a motion, and the motion was very revolutionary. And I want everybody to really hear what this team of lawyers was asking at a federal level. There is a central communication center for the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, and the intra-agency task forces. And it's in El Paso, Texas. What our federal defendants were requesting yesterday was to sunshine the El Paso Intra-Agency Communication Center, which means we wanted all of the footprints of the agents and how they were communicating with each other. Well, we didn't succeed, but we asked for it. And now how many more people know
That there is
that there is such a thing in El Paso, Texas? this is our government. We have the right to know, especially when people like Scott is facing a 20 years. I love him for going up there and saying, I want to see the footprints. Because where is he at in his life? He's at a crossroads. If he doesn't keep fighting a civil rights battle with the American government, he ends up in their prison for 20 years. When they were about to hear the second motion, which was also interesting because the second motion was a request to unveil grand jury hearings. So the grand jury is veiled, right? It's very hard to find out what happened at a grand jury. They did not want you to witness the conversation and the dialogue between the prosecutor, the judge, and the defense team regarding the unveiling of the grand jury, which I would say is really suspect, right?
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Then, the judge was basically looking at the government like, why? You know, why do you want this courtroom cleared? That was great. Judge Zimmerman was great to question, why do you want this courtroom cleared? We start hearing rumors that they're gonna close the courtroom. And I noticed something happen. I noticed different sets of guards come in. And they recorded exactly, you know, I noticed it, you know, but I wasn't able to interpret it. Then I see that they're calling the prosecutor back, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to just try to walk into the courtroom, right? And, you know, I knew that they had already tagged me as an organizer, right? And so I'm like, fuck it, I need to be the person to go up and try to open that courtroom door. And I was having a little, and I'm like, and the guards came to the door and they said the session was closed. Well, I thought, many of us thought, well, they're telling the truth. So what did we do? We left. Later that night, I get a call from the federal defendant. This is what happened. Those were not federal guards, those were federal marshals, and they were acting on behalf of the prosecution team from the government. And actually the judge, while they're holding the door like that for me to get in, and I decide we can't get in and we leave, the judge says, go ahead and open, which was great, but we had already left. And they left the defendants in a situation where you can't go and text the activism team, come on back, because they're already going into the proceedings. What happened with the grand jury request was actually a win, a partial win. They said that they will unveil the portion where the defendant is speaking to the grand jury. So you know it's interesting if the defendant himself requests that the grand jury be revealed. So it's obviously not a situation like Bob Martin at 122 10th Street who gave federal testimony against the community, because you wouldn't want that unveiled. He obviously said something into record that he feels is significant to the grand jury and significant to the progress of a social justice movement. And it'll be interesting to find out what is that testimony and what did occur. So there's a little win on the federal level. Then we all came back here. We were trying to figure out what was going on the local level. And it was an adoption of findings hearing. And the Board of Appeals is probably the most conservative body that we have in San Francisco. And our current board president only has one appointee on it, who is Christine Wong. And he had been trying to get Christine Wong to sit down and meet with me. She had concerns regarding ex parte communication, which means that you're supposed to only make your decisions in plain view of the public and on the body that you're seated on. But I left her a long message of concern. I also worked with Petra DeJesus from the Police Commission to receive a letter that basically said there were three findings that they wanted to adopt. One was based on a type O error in the medical cannabis legislation regarding what is a recreational facility and etc., which what we are changing, but hasn't been changed in law yet. We have a legislative fix that's on its way. It's in process, but it had not been changed by the time we got there yesterday. Then they were making findings on Captain Denise Schmidt's letter, which, if nobody else saw it, basically stated that our community brought homicides, rapes, and stabbings to neighborhoods, that we were crime magnets, and etc. So much of our activism this year in Access of Love was tearing apart Captain Denise Schmidt and saying and having different government bodies talk about this, get this into public dialogue, and basically both the Police Commission and the Planning Commission said, well, you know, you should have some facts around this. You just saying it? Or do you have some documentation? And they were never able to supply any evidence that we brought homicide, stabbings, shootings, rapes, I mean, you know, and etc. So I got a wonderful letter from Petra DeJesus that we needed to convey to the Board of Appeals regarding that statement wasn't true, right? So she wrote a beautiful letter, or actually I wrote it, she signed it, and that's amazing. That's one of those times where you don't care if somebody else signed it because it's beautiful. And she actually took the letter that I wrote, which basically said, not so many words, Captain Denise Schmidt is a big fat liar. And our community is completely safe and there's no evidence to the contrary. So what Christine Wong did for us was monumental yesterday. There was no way that was going to be reversed yesterday, but we, as an organization, kicked the ball as far as we could into the field in our background work and in our work at the actual hearing. This dispensary is legally zoned, and what we're encountering right now is what's called selective enforcement. Filed for rehearing, and then we filed in Superior Court. When you file in Superior Court, you're taking the city to court. You're saying the state law trumps what you're doing, you're in violation, you have selective enforcement. We will win on the Superior Court level. We got a little bit of a win last night. Not a little bit, actually a big win. You had a very conservative body under the direction of Christine Wong take out in their findings Captain Schmidt's letter as relevant. They still denied the permit. We still have to go to Superior Court, but we were able to get them to deny that should be legally put into findings, and that is huge.